got to do something for my own mental health, for my wife's, and for Archie's as well, because I could see where this was.
Just when the world thought the royal chaos had finally burned itself out, when the drama between Harry and Meghan had faded into background noise, when even the most obsessed royal watchers believed the story had reached its last ugly chapter, everything exploded again. And this time, the blast was louder, darker, and far more dangerous. Because suddenly, out of nowhere, a custody agreement quietly finalized behind closed doors became the trigger for accusations so shocking they rattled every corner of the monarchy. Harry didn't just speak, he detonated something. And in the center of that explosion were two names no one expected to hear in the same sentence: Meghan Markle, Prince Andrew. The world blinked, then stared. Because the question hanging in the air wasn't just what happened, it was how long had something been hidden behind the palace walls, behind centuries-old stone corridors where secrets have a way of surviving longer than kings. Something had already been set in motion long before the public ever sensed trouble. The custody deal had finally been signed. A bitter, exhausting chapter between Harry and Meghan, one that had dragged through lawyers, mediators, and private negotiations for months, appeared finished. On the surface, it looked simple: legal closure. Two parents attempting to structure a life for their children. A quiet resolution. But inside the royal system, nothing is ever that simple. Because the crown doesn't react to headlines, it reacts to patterns. And while the public believed calm had returned, palace observers were quietly watching something far more unsettling unfold. Something subtle. Something invisible. At first, the signs were easy to dismiss. Messages that once received instant responses began sitting unanswered. School communications slowed. Medical appointments quietly disappeared from schedules. Administrators who once spoke openly suddenly offered polite, rehearsed deflections. Then silence. A strange, creeping silence. Not the peaceful kind, the deliberate kind. The kind that spread slowly through systems that once functioned perfectly. At first glance, it looked like coincidence. Children miss school sometimes, doctors cancel appointments, life gets busy. But when those small disruptions begin happening everywhere at once, the pattern stops looking random. And patterns are exactly what the royal institution watches for. Because when the palace investigates something, it doesn't search for noise, it searches for absence. And suddenly, absence was everywhere. Two small desks in a California classroom sat empty. Archie, Lilibet. At first, the teachers barely noticed. Early in a school term, absences are normal. But when the morning attendance sheet came back with no explanation, no parent message, no transfer notice, concern began to creep in. Phone calls were made, voicemails left, emails sent politely at first, then urgently. But every attempt to reach the parents hit the same wall: silence. The school contacted representatives. Nothing. They contacted mediators. Still nothing. And at that exact moment, the invisible line between private family matters and child welfare concern was crossed. Because once children disappear from official educational systems without explanation, it stops being private. It becomes a safeguarding issue. By afternoon, something far more serious had begun. Child protection channels quietly activated, not because of who the children were, but because of what the system couldn't find. Travel records, immigration notices, residence updates, homeschool filings, medical continuity reports. There was nothing. No traces, no paperwork, no bureaucratic footprints. Families in chaos leave messy trails. Arguments create documents. Emergency decisions create mistakes. But this situation left none of that. Instead, investigators discovered something much more disturbing: precision. Every professional safeguard, education, healthcare, oversight had been disengaged slowly and deliberately, one by one, without replacement, without explanation. It didn't look like panic, it looked like planning. And that realization triggered alarms far beyond California. Because when children connected to the royal family vanish from multiple systems simultaneously, the information doesn't stay local. It travels fast. Inside Windsor, quiet conversations suddenly turned urgent. Advisors who normally spoke in careful diplomatic phrases began using colder language. Identity risk, emotional displacement, continuity failure. These were not words used lightly. They suggested something far more troubling than simple parental disagreement. They suggested a child's stability. Their entire structure of normal life might be slowly dissolving. And once palace analysts assembled the timeline, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Schools disconnected, medical oversight halted, legal channels blocked, trust funds quietly redirected. Every safeguard meant to anchor the children's lives had been weakened at the same time. At that point, the question inside the palace was no longer whether something had gone wrong. The real question was far darker. darker. Was the silence itself the strategy? Because in royal systems, silence can be more powerful than scandal. Silence can erase records. Silence can hide decisions. Silence can slowly remove children from the structures meant to protect them. And once that possibility entered the conversation, patience inside the institution evaporated. Royal structures exist for one reason above all others: continuity. When continuity collapses, intervention begins. Quietly, relentlessly, without negotiation. Which is why the next move from Windsor shocked even the most seasoned insiders. An emergency meeting was called. Not scheduled weeks ahead, not carefully arranged. Summoned immediately. Senior officials were escorted through guarded corridors with no briefing notes and no explanation. Phones were confiscated. Assistants dismissed. Doors closed. Inside that room, the air felt heavy with the same unspoken question. What had happened that required this level of secrecy? Then the doors opened once more, and Princess Anne walked in carrying a thick red folder. Everyone in the room knew instantly what that meant, because red folders in Windsor are not ordinary paperwork. They appear only when decisions carry constitutional consequences. The seal on that folder contained words rarely invoked in modern royal history: immediate custodial breach, maternal withdrawal. Inside were reports compiled from multiple independent systems, education authorities, medical institutions, legal advisors, intelligence analysts, each document pointing to the same conclusion. The children had been quietly removed from nearly every protective structure designed to monitor their welfare. School records showed abrupt disappearance. Medical files revealed treatment cancellations without transfer of care. Legal communication channels had been blocked. Trust funds intended to safeguard education had been dissolved. And intelligence reports suggested months of preparation, careful planning, strategic disengagement. This wasn't chaos, this was method. One advisor finally broke the silence with a sentence that froze the room. This is not co-parenting. At that moment, the palace moved from observation to intervention. But what happened next would shock Harry himself and trigger the accusations that would drag Meghan and Andrew into the center of a storm no one saw coming. And that storm was only beginning. Inside Windsor, once the red folder had been opened and the evidence laid bare, the atmosphere in the room changed instantly. What began as confusion hardened into something far more serious: quiet determination. The palace had already spent months observing the pattern, but the documents in Princess Anne's folder made one thing painfully clear: the situation had crossed the line. This was no longer about disagreements between two parents. It had become a matter of institutional responsibility. Because when children tied to the monarchy vanish from educational systems, medical supervision, and legal oversight simultaneously, the crown is forced to act, not as a family member, but as a guardian of continuity. And that guardian role carries power rarely seen in public. The discussion inside Windsor was brief. There were no emotional debates, no dramatic arguments. The evidence spoke for itself. School authorities confirmed unexplained withdrawal. Doctors confirmed halted medical continuity. Court mediators confirmed blocked communication channels. Financial analysts confirmed that an educational trust built to protect the children's future had been quietly dismantled. Each system alone might have raised concern, but together they formed something else entirely: a coordinated collapse of oversight. Within hours, the decision was made. A rarely invoked constitutional safeguard would be activated. The clause allows the Crown to intervene when royal minors face identity displacement, welfare instability, or the breakdown of legal guardianship structures. It had not been used in living memory, but the circumstances now demanded it. The intervention began quietly. Children's passports were secured. Commercial rights to their names and images were immediately frozen. Education restoration plans were drafted. Psychological support teams were assembled. Every action focused on one goal: restoring stability to the children's lives before the damage became irreversible. But while Windsor moved swiftly behind closed doors, something equally explosive was unfolding outside. Because Prince Harry, watching events spiral beyond his control, made a move that stunned everyone following the story. He spoke, and what he said shattered whatever fragile peace remained between him and Meghan. In a series of explosive private claims that quickly leaked through legal channels and online forums, Harry began pointing towards something far darker than a custody dispute. He alleged that the circumstances surrounding the children's disappearance from public systems were not accidental. According to sources circulating within royal circles, Harry suggested that a hidden network of relationships and influences might have been shaping decisions behind the scenes. And in the middle of those allegations appeared a name already buried in scandal: Prince Andrew. The connection stunned observers. Andrew's reputation had already collapsed under years of controversy tied to elite social circles and questionable associations. But Harry's claims suggested that Andrew's past might not be isolated history. Instead, Harry implied that certain overlapping social environments, exclusive gatherings, luxury travel circles, elite networking spaces had once intersected with Meghan's early career years. Almost instantly, the internet erupted. Online communities that specialize in dissecting royal gossip began digging through old archives. Images resurfaced. Photos of Meghan aboard yachts with wealthy socialites. Blurry snapshots from luxury events. Fragments of old interviews. Most of the material was inconclusive, but repetition transformed speculation into apparent patterns. The phrase that began dominating online discussion was one loaded with controversy. Yacht girl. Supporters dismissed it as cruel rumor. Critics claimed it explained unexplained connections. Threads multiplied across social media platforms. Anonymous accounts stitched together timelines suggesting that Meghan's entry into elite circles might have brought her into environments connected to Andrew's old social sphere. No proof, just patterns. But in the modern media landscape, patterns can be enough to ignite a firestorm. The timing of Harry's allegations added even more fuel. Andrew's fall from royal favor had removed a long-standing layer of protection around many old relationships. Without that shield, old photographs and half-forgotten stories began resurfacing rapidly. Screenshots circulated, captions repeated, speculation hardened into belief for many watching from the outside. Meanwhile, inside Windsor, none of this online chaos mattered because the palace had already made its decision. The children would be protected first. Everything else could burn if necessary. Prince Harry, sensing the gravity of the palace's intervention, made one final attempt to regain control of the situation. He formally requested temporary custodial authority. The request moved through royal legal channels quickly, but the Crown evaluates such petitions through cold institutional criteria, not personal sympathy. Guardianship requires stability, clear jurisdiction, demonstrated capacity, and according to the reports now sitting inside Windsor's legal chambers, those conditions could not be guaranteed. The request was declined. No condemnation, no public humiliation, just a formal decision delivered through legal procedure. Outside the palace walls, speculation intensified. Journalists chased rumors. Influencers fueled debates. Commentators argued endlessly about whether Harry's accusations held any truth. Was he exposing hidden connections or desperately trying to redirect attention away from the custody crisis? No one could say for certain, but inside Windsor, the storm barely registered because the palace had already shifted focus entirely. Within the castle's ancient walls, a quieter drama began unfolding. School lessons resumed. Health appointments were quietly reestablished. Specialists helped the children rebuild routine. And in the center of that delicate restoration stood a familiar royal figure, Princess Catherine. She entered the situation without announcement, cameras, or publicity. Her role wasn't political, it was emotional, ensuring the children felt stability again. There were no staged photographs, no media briefings, just quiet presence. Then, weeks later, one single image slipped past the palace's careful privacy shield. A photograph taken outside Windsor Chapel. Two small figures walking hand in hand, Princess Charlotte and little Lilibet. To casual viewers, it looked like an ordinary family moment, but to those watching closely, it symbolized something much bigger. Anchoring, direction restored. Children who had drifted dangerously close to chaos now standing on stable ground again. But within the palace, one simple truth had already been decided. The children were safe. And sometimes, in the world of royal power and scandal, that quiet outcome speaks louder than any public victory. Yet the echoes of Harry's accusations, the shadows connecting Meghan, Andrew, and the hidden corners of elite society were far from finished, because stories like this never truly end. They simply wait for the next secret to surface.